Good morning. It is August 11th, 2022. This is actually my third attempt at this video. I will get it. One of these days, I will get it. It is a beautiful morning, about 70 degrees. So what is that, 20 in Celsius? The sun is shining, the birds are chirping. It's a glorious morning, and I am attempting to do this video. The subject that I wanted to talk about this morning has to do with reading the Bible and which Bible to read. I notice a lot of people online asking the question, well, what Bible do I read? They're looking for the best Bible, which is great. But there is no perfect answer to that. Years ago, at All Saints Church in Chicago, where Father Patrick Henry Reardon was priest, he did a homily on this. And he started off by saying, the second most dangerous thing that you can do is read the Bible. Of course, he followed that off with, the most dangerous thing that you can do is not read the Bible. And he is very, very educated and has done all sorts of study of the Bible and gone back into the original languages. And when we had Bible study on the Gospels at his church, he often used translations that he was working on himself to try to make things as clear as possible. However, even he would not say that there is like the 100%, this is the best version of the Bible. Growing up, I got to be familiar with several different versions of the Bible. In kindergarten, my teacher generally stuck to the King James version, and we did a lot of memorization there. So even as an adult, it's not like I remember all of the Bible verses that I had to memorize, but with the ones that I do remember, they tend to be in the King James version. But it didn't seem like a big deal, because with our Bible time, these things were explained to us, and we had the stories and things to go with. I remember in third grade having the Good News Bible, and even my parents weren't really thrilled about that. It's not so much that it's a simplified Bible, but they're trying to use language that's not too difficult. I don't know that it was necessarily geared towards children, but it was definitely geared towards people who might not have as big a vocabulary. The other thing about those Bibles was they had like stickman illustrations inside, and that was amusing for a little kid. But when I was in fourth grade, the school officially changed over to the New International Version, and everybody pretty much thought that that was great, which is interesting now, being Orthodox, because so many people seem to have big problems with the New International Version. And I hadn't had a New International Version in the house for a long time, until my kids started at a parochial school and they needed the New International Version. So we have it in the house, and we have multiple copies in the house. As an adult, I got to do a good amount of reading with the New Revised Standard Version, which was one of the first translations of the Bible that had the Apocrypha in it, and I was interested to know what was in there as I was becoming Orthodox. And then The original Orthodox Study Bible of the New Testament was basically the New King James Version. And so I'm familiar with that. I don't know if they changed a whole lot when they came out with the full Bible. As far as the New Testament goes, probably not. But then I read through the Old Testament in the Orthodox Study Bible. There are people who are Orthodox who kind of think that that's the only version. And then there's some people who seem to hate it as well. All the division, so to speak, seems to make it easy for certain people as they're looking at Christian things or even Orthodox things, but not to the same extent, kind of throw up their hands and say, well, if all of this is different, then you can't say that what is in this Bible is right if it's not in this Bible, etc., etc. Yes and no. And it's mostly no. As somebody who has done a little bit of translating, and I haven't done a lot, I do German and English, it is really, really difficult to translate things. One of the easiest examples that I can think of is saying that you're hungry. In English, you would just say, I'm hungry. And in German, you would say, ich habe Hunger. And word for word, that is translated, I have hunger. For people who are not familiar with languages and translation, the idea is that you can just plug in words to substitute one another and then you're good. But translation is actually a process of trying to get the idea across as accurately as possible, but you don't always have the same words, the same nuance. You definitely don't have the same play on words, and when you get to things like poetry and music, it's another headache just trying to capture something of the same metric. And for the people who still do poetry translations, my hat is off to you. I remember a couple months ago getting into a discussion with a couple of young men over Telegram about something in the Bible, and I brought up the imagery of birth pangs, and they seemed quite confused, and I brought up Bible CC or something to find the specific reference, and I sent them the reference, and they went and looked up this thing in the Orthodox Study Bible, and they couldn't find it. I was interested, so I pulled out my own Orthodox Study Bible, and sure enough, in the translation for the Orthodox Study Bible, they had not used the term birth pangs, except in the heading for the section, but they used a translation something like the beginning of the end, or the rumblings of the beginning of the end, or something like that. Back in the day, pretty much everybody would have been familiar with what birth pangs are. Certainly anybody who's had a baby knows what these are, and back in the day when people had children at home, they had many children at home, pretty much everybody would have been familiar with this. Nowadays, especially in the United States and other Western places, it's much more common for people to go to the hospital, have babies. People are having fewer children, and fewer people are having children. And it's an experience that is not shared with the entire family. So I can kind of see why they did that. I'm pretty sure that was the original example. Um, but there's a certain amount of leeway as far as what you want to convey and how you're going to convey it. And even in some of the translation work that I've done, it's interesting because I will come back maybe a couple months, maybe a couple years later, and kind of be dissatisfied with it. I'll think, well, I could have done this, and I could have done that, and would this have made it better? And then the other part of me just has to say, no, it's good enough. It works. So it's definitely an art. The main point, though, is that it doesn't do anybody a whole lot of good to see all these translations and versions of the Bible in competition with each other. That when you read the Bible and when you read different versions of the Bible, you can compile everything and understand to a greater degree, not a lesser degree, what was being written, what was meant. And certainly I'm not talking about, say, the Book of Mormon or anything like that. And then, you have the issue of, say, the Apocrypha. And interestingly enough, when I lived in Germany, I found out that pretty much all the Protestant Bibles, well, at least half of them, still have the Apocrypha in them, and that there's kind of an interesting story that I might share later about a Lutheran deaconess and the Apocrypha, but that belongs somewhere else. So when people talk about the Bible, I was watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire back in the day, and the German version certainly includes stories from, say, the Maccabees or Judith, because that's just considered part of the Bible, whether you're Catholic or Protestant. There's slight differences in what is officially canon, what is kind of the appendices among the Orthodox. I mean, I love Fourth Maccabees. It's probably not really a book. It goes to expand on one of the things that happens in Second Maccabees. I think it is worthwhile to read, and I'm glad it was part of my new Revised Standard Version Bible, the first one that I had that had an Apocrypha. I don't know, but the thing is not to get into all sorts of debates and things that tear people away from the church because of small deviations. And most of them are small deviations. Bibles are not things that are written in a fly-by-night or translated in a fly-by-night fashion. There have been some solo translations of the Bible along the way, but they take years and years, and even committees who do translations take years and years. And so most of them, if they're going to put that much effort into it, are going to work to do a decent job of it. And so you generally don't have people going off on their own scripture. The issue though, a lot of places is that with the explosion of denominations, especially on the Protestant side, and especially with the advent of like televangelism and things, there's really kind of a reward for a lot of pastors to come up with new and novel interpretation of the Bible. And that's where you find a lot of trouble. It's one of the reasons why I am Orthodox. I did become Orthodox because you have this standard interpretation. And I, as a kid growing up in the Protestant world, you still had a lot of that there, and I see a lot less of that as an adult in the Protestant world. When something is in doubt, if some reading is odd or seems off, there is the opportunity to see how the church has interpreted it, how the church fathers and theologians have interpreted it, and how that all meshes together. In short, when talking about the best version of the Bible, most of the time it's the version that you read. And once you've read one version and you want to understand differences, you can go to another version. And I hate even saying version. They're translations, and you have everything from, say, simple English to almost trying to what they call literal translations, where they're trying to mimic the structure of the original languages. And they all have their place. Of course, there are the people who do want to get into it to the point of going back to the more original languages, and that is amazing, and that is laudable. But even then, you have a lot of times the cultural differences, not just across languages, but across time as well. And yeah, I mean, for example, in the song Yankee Doodle, if I have this correct, macaroni was a term that kind of meant cool or fashionable or something. So when, he stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni, it wasn't that he loved pasta so much, it was that he thought it was great. Anyway, I hope all of you have a great day. Hope to get back to the video and the audio soon. In the meantime, check out the blog. I'm trying to keep up with the Wordles at least, and have some other content in the meantime, as I have the time and energy and all that. It's been crazy the last couple of weeks, but such is life. Take care. Bye-bye.